Here we go. All right, welcome to our Sacred Masculine class today. A couple things that we're going to be talking about, which are occurring one day after the next. On February 17th, we have the first of the 3 Saturn square Uranus events that are happening this year. And then the next day on the 18th is the activation of the third labor. That's a part of the phase 2 of the 6 phases of the Mars Synodic cycle. Just to remind you that that starts with phase 0 and goes through phase 5. Those are the 6 phases. And then when we look at Joseph Campbell's work, this phase of the Mars Synodic cycle is a part of the Initiation Act. He has 3 acts: the Departure Act, the Initiation Act, and the Return Act. So we're in the second act. So let's look at our agenda for today. Okay. So before we establish spiritual protection, there's something I'd like to speak to regarding a correction I'd like to make about something I misspoke on from the Sacred Feminine class. And then we're going to open sacred space. Now we're going to look at February's energies. We're going to look again at where we are with the hero's journey in the Mars Synodic cycle. We're going to do closure around the second labor. And this part here, I'm going to go ahead and delete because that's not supposed to be there. That's a mistype from last class, so that won't be there. Then we're going to look at and it's important to look at that because with it happening the day before the third labor, there are some really significant aspects in that event that are going to be interwoven with what's happening with the aspects at the third labor. So really informing our experience of the third labor. And then we'll talk about the vision quest opportunities that are available to you. And always at any point when you have questions, please pause me so that we can dive into those. So let's look at the correction from the Sacred Feminine class. So we were talking about the full armor of God and how it's being described in the book of Ephesians. And I had discussed Maureen's research on that and how she discovered the armor of the goddess Diana. And I misspoke and called the city Ephesia. So that was not the name of the city. I apologize for that. That was a misspeak on my account. The actual city that the book of Ephesians comes from is this city here. And I've always called it this Ephesus, but I'm watching a lecture now on the Celtic history from a Harvard PhD. She pronounces this differently. She pronounces it Ephesus.
Oh.
So I don't know if you've ever heard Ephesus or if you've heard it as Ephesus, Ephesus. I'm not Greek. And so if there are any Greek scholars out there watching this, accept my humblest apologies. But I did want to correct that city reference. Here are some pictures of the ruins of that temple. 2 different shots here. And Ephesus or Ephesus is located in modern day Turkey. And I did mention correctly that this temple was originally an Artemis temple and then became a Diana temple. What I did not mention, which is interesting, is that this temple is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And it was described in this way, which is, I think, spectacular. When I saw the house of Artemis that mounted to the clouds, those other marvels lost their brilliancy. And I said, lo, apart from Olympus, the sun never looked on aught so grand. So it must have really been spectacular in its day. So that's the correction from the Sacred Feminine class. Thank you, Maureen, for doing all that work on the
Thank you.
armor of Diana. I knew I'd
Yes.
find the word. So now we will settle in to establish spiritual protection. And go ahead and close your eyes, get your feet settled. Take a couple of deep breaths. Take one way down into that Earth Star chakra. We claim this space for the work of the Christ consciousness and the Sophia consciousness. Put on the full armor of God. Put on the full armor of Diana. We seal this space with the light of the golden ray. Aho. So it seems coincidental, and of course it's not, that we're doing an invocation to the god Pluto, because today is the day that Venus is descending into the Inanna underworld. But more importantly than that, you will see that Pluto plays an important role in the activation of the third labor. So it was actually its role in the activation of the third labor that inspired me to do the invocation of Pluto. And then when I realized that today's class was going to be on the day that Venus is descending into the Inanna world, it was like, well, can't make this stuff up. That's a beautiful synchronicity. So go ahead and get your space ready. I have my candle on. You want to smudge or spray oils or incense, whatever you'd like to use. Are you on the phone today, Doreen, or can you read the invocation?
I can read.
All right.
Invocation of the god Pluto. I invoke the transformative power of Pluto. I call forth your purifying and regenerative energy. Give me courage to honestly face myself and the power to transmute myself into my glorious divine self.
That's beautiful. That could actually be a little invocation you could do every day while you're in the Inanna underworld. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Pluto before we move on, because some of the things that we're going to learn through the myth of Pluto, we're going to find become significant in terms of some of the luminary bodies that are being activated at the Saturn square Uranus event and in the third labor of Mars. So what we find out is that Pluto is actually the Roman name of this lord of the underworld. In Greek culture, he is known as Hades. And while it is commonly known that he is the lord of the underworld, there are a couple of things about him that I learned that I might have known at one time when we studied these gods in middle school English, but I've long since forgotten. One is that Pluto dispensed luck and controlled the fates of all mortals. He was the master of ores, metals, and the precious stones found within the earth. And so for this reason, he was celebrated by many as the bringer of wealth. So that was a pleasant surprise for me to discover.
Yeah, me too.
Now, one of Pluto's most famous myths is centered on his abduction of Proserpina. That's her Roman name. She's known as Persephone in the Greek tradition, and how her abduction caused great distress and grief for her mother, known as Ceres in the Roman world and Demeter in the Greek world. And this is a piece of that myth that I also was not aware of. It turns out that the way that this whole incident got started is because Pluto was apparently a very lonely god and seldom encountered other people. And so Venus took pity on him. And she told her son Cupid to fire one of his love arrows at Pluto so that he might become smitten with the next woman he saw. And guess who that woman was? It was Proserpina or Persephone. That's who it was. And that's how this myth got, and her abduction all got started, is because Venus played that significant role there. And if you're not aware of that myth, what we find out is that because of the grief of Ceres as the earth goddess mother, and what happens with Proserpina having to stay in the underworld 6 months out of the year because she ate 6 of the pomegranate seeds. This is the myth that comes behind the reasoning for this change of the seasons. So during the 6 months that Proserpina gets to return to the surface of the earth, we have the spring and summer seasons. And then when she has to return to the underworld, we have autumn and fall. Another prominent tale in Pluto's mythos involved the figure of Orpheus. Orpheus was a musician and a mystic that was known in the Greek world for founding a cult. They called it a cult known as the Orphic Mysteries. And actually, we're going to look a little deeper into it because it's a little bit more than just a cult. But because of Pluto being a central figure in the myth of Orpheus, he himself becomes enshrined in the Orphic Mysteries. So we'll see how that happens. So it turns out that the Orphic Mysteries were a mystery school very similar to the old Egyptian mystery schools, and we'll see how that happened. Orphism was the most significant belief system in ancient Greece. And at that time, Greece was a mixture of superstitious magic, philosophical cults, and then these, what they called sects, these mystical sects, like the Pythagoreanism sect, that were based on mystical concepts. And the Orphic religion, as well as its text, was associated with this mythical poet Orpheus, as we said on the previous slide. Now, this is what's fascinating to me. The adherents of Orphism developed this Eleusinian mystery festival, which was an annual celebration that was celebrated for 2,000 years. And what that celebration was a celebration of Demeter and Persephone, Ceres, Proserpina, as well as their mysterious consort, Dionysus. And what we find out is that it's actually the Egyptians who considered Dionysus to be a representation of Pluto. They equated Pluto and Dionysus as one and the same. And so we can see here that these Orphic mysteries and these Eleusinian mysteries are all steeped in what we discussed in the Sacred Feminine class regarding the Inanna Underworld, these death and rebirth mysteries. That all of these mystery schools were built on whatever their current understanding of the death and rebirth analogies were at the time. And so we find out that this myth of Ceres, Demeter, the abduction of Proserpina, Persephone, was related to these death and rebirth mysteries. And so something a little bit more significant in nature than just a story for why the seasons change in the way that they do. Now, it turns out that the Egyptian myths exerted a lot of influence on the Greek myths because of the fact that the Greek merchants were frequently visiting Egypt during the 6th century. And so they would have been very aware, the Greek merchants, the Greeks in general, would have been very aware of the Egyptian cult of the dead. Again, they use that word cult, which is interesting to me. And it seems to me that those people that would have been considered elevated citizens, like the Druids were to the Celts, the priests, the priestesses, those with the higher knowledge or the sacred knowledge, it's interesting how they defined those groups as cults, which is very different than the way the word cult is used today. So again, remember that the Egyptians equated Dionysus with Pluto and their beliefs in terms of the cult of the dead was very much an influence on this cult of Dionysus, which then was an influence on these Orphic mysteries, which was then an influence on these Eleusinian mysteries. It all just kind of rolled one into the other and into the other. And what's interesting is that in this myth of with Dionysus, he actually ends up being dismembered at the hands of the Titans, which mirrors in effect the myth around Osiris and how Osiris, the Lord of the Underworld, is also dismembered and has his parts, strewn across the world. And then Isis has to send Horus out to find all of the parts to bring him back together. And this is how we get the golden phallus, because every part was rediscovered except for the phallus. So we see here over and over again, going back and back and back, how one mystery school that's influenced another mystery school that influences another mystery school, all these myths that come out of it, they're all steeped in these death and rebirth mysteries. And this is really significant to be aware of, as today we are descending into the Inanna Underworld. Any questions about the myth of Pluto / Dionysus / Hades / Osiris or these Orphic mysteries, death and rebirth mysteries? Okay.
Nope.
All right. So of course we saw this slide in the Sacred Feminine class, but we're focused on a new part of it. Here's today, February 13th. Remember that Venus is exact Mercury retrograde, exact. And remember that Jupiter is standing close by within 2 degrees. And this is another piece about Jupiter that came into my awareness after that class, which I didn't have an opportunity to share. one of the key words for Jupiter is trust. And so it's interesting as I reflect back on that class, and we were talking about going into the Inanna underworld and the kind of trust that it takes to be able to go into the Inanna underworld. And, you know, is there a safety net? Is there not a safety net? What would that look like? You know, trusting when you're not able to see. It is very encouraging to know that as Venus is descending into the underworld, Jupiter, the cosmic guru, is standing right there, and that the message perhaps that he is having the cosmic messenger Mercury share with us as we descend today is that he is there and that we can trust whatever the process is, however it may unfold for us. We can trust that it's exactly what we require so that we can emerge into that greater self that we have already evolved into. And so I thought that that was a really interesting perspective to take on the fact that, yes, Jupiter is known for amplifying and expanding experiences, but, you know, as the Lord of the Sagittarius realm, that trust piece is a big piece as well. So the first Saturn-Uranus square is going to take place in 4 days on the 17th, and then the very next day is that activation of the third labor of Mars. All right, so here we've got the hero's journey and the Mars synodic cycle. And you haven't seen this yet because what I had provided before was really only filled in up through the test, allies, and enemies. So remember, we've got the 12 steps that are incorporated into the 3 acts, and now we're taking the 6 Mars synodic phases and we're incorporating them into those. So this initiation act is the 2nd act. The return act is the 3rd act. Steps 5 through 9 are a part of this initiation act. We've gone through crossing the first threshold. We're now in the 6th step of the test, allies, and enemies. And here we are at the 3rd labor. So we've got about 6 more months to go before we finish these labors. Mm-hmm. And the last labor, which will be in August, will be related to this 7th step, the approach to the inmost cave where the hero gets closer to his goal. Mm-hmm. Then before we finish the initiation act, we go into phase 3, the ordeal, in which the hero faces the biggest test of all. This is where phase 3, Mars goes into the underworld in August of 23rd. And you'll recall how Maureen and I spoke about on our trip to France. Venus was in the Inanna underworld at the same time that Mars was in his underworld. And so it takes 34 years because the Venus cycle is 19 months, the Mars cycle is 24 months. It takes 34 years for those underworld periods to sync up. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have the last step of the initiation act is the reward, where the hero sees the light at the end of the tunnel. That will bring us into phase 4 of the Mars synodic cycle, where Mars has his rebirth and growth of wisdom. And then finally, we enter the final act, the return act. And that return act and the 3 steps that are a part of the return act are a part of that phase 5, Mars, maturity, and elder knowledge. And I realized that Carrie and Doreen did not start this journey with us from the very beginning, but if you watched the first class, you would have seen that phase 0 and phase 1 are a part of the first act, the departure act. So that's how all of these tie in together. So we still have a little ways to go before we get through all these labors. And I feel like I'm facing challenges, new challenges even today. Thank God each of you are a part of my squad to face it with.
We're here for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about all of this? Okay, so here we are. What is this, the 5th class? It's taken me this long to be able to take Joseph Campbell's work of the 3 acts. Can't remember the other guy's name with the 12 steps. I think I've it written down here. Yeah, Christopher Vogler and how he took the 3 acts and broke it out into the 12 steps.
Right.
And then, oh, Maureen, help me. What is his name? Giamario. Daniel Giamario, is that his name?
Giamario. Yeah.
Daniel Giamario's 6 phases of the cycle and how those fit in between. It's like, it's so like 180 degrees different than the sacred feminine, Venus synodic cycle, the myth of Inanna. It's just like so different that my mind really was having a hard time putting all of this together. But I think I've got it here.
Yeah, Daniel has named some 3 phases, names them, and I can't remember the names of them, but he reads everybody's chart on what phase they were born in.
Oh.
That's how he looks at that. And so I think there's just 3 that he identifies as the larger picture. Yeah. And this other guy is what, 12? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Joseph Campbell starts out with the 3 acts.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Vogler broke those out into the 12 steps. And Daniel's the one that got the information on these six phases. So I find it fascinating because, I read what he's written about that, and sometimes it totally makes sense to me, and then sometimes it's like, what? I'm completely lost. So.
No, I've never taken a Mars class before. Never paid much attention to Mars, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So much focused on the divine feminine, but yeah, that's not balanced. So
right.
Have to look at Mars too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So any questions about anything that I've shared here? And if you're confused, trust me, I get it. I've been looking at this for 5 months and I'm just now starting to feel comfortable with it. Okay.
It's a lot to take in, but yeah.
It is a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And I don't know if it's a lot to take in because as a person, as a soul incarnated in a female body, especially because I'm about a decade older than you and Carrie. So, when I was growing up, little girls were supposed to jump rope and little boys were supposed to play baseball. And that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And so there was, there wasn't any cultural influence on connecting with the masculine element in my external environment. And there was certainly, no discussion on connecting with the masculine element within me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was also ancestral, just to make you aware. My mother's mother, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, grew up during the Great Depression. And, you know, I remember her often repeating this story about how she and her three older brothers and their parents, my great grandparents, and was blessed to know my great grandmother, lived with her grandparents, her mother's parents. So 3 generations in the house, which was not unusual at that time. Sometimes it might have even been more. And they had trying to find the word, hold on a second, a boarding house. They had a boarding house. And because it was the Depression, and because she was the only daughter, and then there was her mother and her grandmother, they were the only women in the family. They were expected to prepare the meals for the family and for the boarders. And night after night after night, she would be told, "You're not hungry tonight."
Aw.
And it was because they had a pecking order
Mhm.
in terms of who got fed first. And so first the boarders got fed, and then the men in the family got to eat. And if there was anything left over, she and her mother and her grandmother could eat. But many times there wasn't enough food. And by being told, "You're not hungry tonight," that was her signal that there just wasn't going to be enough and she wasn't going to be able to eat. So even that significant breach between the value of the masculine and the value of the feminine
Mhm.
was something that was passed down ancestrally to me through that heritage. And so, you know, I wonder, is it because of that and because of my own early childhood experience, is that why I'm having such a difficult time embracing this Mars synodic cycle? I mean, it's an interesting question.
Mhm.
Yes.
Are any of you experiencing any of that disconnect?
I've gone through it. I went through it in 2012, and so no, I'm at a different place than you. Uh, You know, it's just I've been through that where I would not face my inner masculine. I didn't want to, didn't care. So that's like denying half yourself, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a tough go, but I had to turn around and look at him, and that's when that started, 2012. So I've been through it. I know what you're dealing with.
Well, you know, I did encounter my sacred masculine when we were in France, which was the first time I've actually seen him.
Mm.
But I
Mm.
still think that there's some remnant disconnected frequencies, which is probably impacting my ability to fully comprehend all of these integration between the phases of the cycle and the hero's journey. Doreen, did you experience any of that kind of thing growing up?
Maureen, I had a question about any recommendations, any guidance, like how to work through that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not easy, you know, because we have all that ancestral um, feminine in our DNA. It's
Mhm.
not easy to accept the masculine as an equal because we felt like we weren't equal to him for so long.
Mhm.
But part of the balance, yeah. I'm hoping to get rid of that last of it in the underworld. That's my plan.
And I can say I don't think I'm there yet. So I can't.
Yeah, I understand that.
I
I
think
really
the
do.
key, I think the key is to stay open and be brave.
Mm.
And the way to do that is that while you remain open, to keep perspective. And the key to keeping perspective is communing with source.
Mhm.
So it's important to know that while this journey might feel awkward because it hasn't been encouraged, or maybe it's even been dissuaded, likely, it's a natural journey. It's a good journey. It's a journey that has a lot of energy that you're not familiar with. And it may seem scary and overwhelming, but that's you. That's your energy. So the best thing I can suggest is like ride it like a wave, you know, like embrace it, ride it like a wave, but stay connected to source so it doesn't take you away.
Mhm.
So if you start to feel overwhelmed with the energy, meditate, connect with source.
Mhm.
Keep in mind, because Sophia Mona Lisa has been telling us this, the masculine energy has been negatively painted with patriarchy.
Hmm.
And so we tend to think of masculine energy as this big, scary bomb of energy. And unfortunately, a lot of men, and even women for that matter, myself, I've been responsible for this, come across inappropriately with their masculine energy to the point where it's overpowering. It's not wielded the way it's intended.
Mm.
But when it is, and see, this is what I'm discovering on this journey, because I've done this journey countless times. I embrace this journey. I know this journey. This is a familiar journey to me.
Mhm.
But what's making it unique this time is its quiet energy. And it's still very, very, very powerful. Don't get me wrong. But instead of it blowing my mind and subsequently my top, which often comes with that, I'm finding it's more Ward Cleaver like. It's more ground, and I think it's maybe because it's finally coming in balance with the feminine,
Mhm.
but it's more of the calm, controlled, I've got this. It's confident, it's wise, it's patient, and it's not invested in other people's outcomes. And that is very much a masculine energy. And when it's wielded well, when you embrace it, well, it will feel safe. It will feel supportive, like the pegs in the astrological chart. It'll feel supportive. It won't be scary, but you have to, it's finding balance. Finding the balance. But remember, it's like Asmodeus's rod. I'm going to keep coming back. That guy shows up all the time.
Mhm.
It's like Asmodeus's rod. It won't hurt you. It can't in and of itself harm you, your reactions, your responses. Yes, which is why it's so important to meditate and be in touch with source, because it's what keeps us from making those spontaneous mistakes, otherwise called being human.
Yeah, and I think each generation will be looking at that differently. I'm a baby boomer.
The thing is, the next
And,
year, so this up and coming generation, they're adding pronouns. This stuff's getting complicated, folks, because it's no longer just a masculine and female, it'll be the they journey. And there's Zeds, there's these new pronouns we're gonna have to learn that aren't even she or he.
I suppose, but I'm not probably going to spend a lot of time on that. I did ask my granddaughter what I was.
Yes.
She shared. I kind of figured I was that, but
What did she tell you?
and I'm a straight female oriented person, you know, and she is too. So
She, her, hers is what you
she
came up with.
yeah, she's the same as I am in terms of pronouns. We're both her, she, you know.
I don't know about you, but I'm really liking the they.
Mhm.
I don't want to
Oh, we
complicate
had a
things
friend
and
who
make
was
people they me, but I'm liking this idea of the they.
Yeah, she had a friend who was they. She changed her name to Leo.
And she goes by they, or I don't mean gay, I meant they, They.
They, yeah,
Yeah.
you can't say her. It's they.
They,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Some
it's
tricky stuff.
I've not heard that pronoun used before. And so maybe I'm not real hip, but what's interesting about the they is that it really speaks to both your inner feminine and your inner masculine
Right?
Yes.
And source.
and source.
Like kind of, I liked it. So I was going to go, because this is a big thing in my and in Doreen's work world, is, you know, being open about your pronouns so that students feel comfortable being whatever they identify with. And so when you self-identify, then they feel more comfortable that they know how to relate to you, because it's a space that's confusing for them, because it's a very gray space compared to what we are accustomed to. But I found, so I was like I definitely identify as female. I mean, I wouldn't put he in there, although I don't mind sometimes, because the nature of what I teach, I'm confused as being a he. And when I went to Carnegie Mellon, they thought on a fellowship, they thought I was Carl. So I am accustomed to being confused for being a dude, but I definitely identify as female, but I really identified as the they thing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do her, hers, she, and they.
Yeah,
And my 15-year-old said, it's wrong.
that's wrong.
So I got corrected. I was wrong, but now I just had a student, and my student trumps my son, because my son's only 15, whereas my student's an adult, right? In this space.
Mhm.
But I have been told it's perfectly acceptable. So it's a tricky space.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. And I do think the they honors a lot of the stuff that we work with in this class. So I was going to wear it, but it got a little trickier than I wanted. And that's
We have a
where
colleague that identifies he, him, they. Mhm.
who does?
There's a colleague at our institution that they identify he, him, they.
He, him, they. See, I like that. And I was going to do that, but I was told I'd be offensive. So you can't win for losing. You can't be yourself without offending somebody. It's a very uncomfortable situation. But I just recently, like 2 days ago, had a student thank me how cool it was that how refreshing it was that I was announcing my pronouns,
Mhm.
even though they're not tricky pronouns at all, since I wasn't allowed to make them tricky in the family.
Nope, this is good. Embrace our inner masculine.
So getting back to that question that you asked Maureen about how to do that.
Yep.
And Carrie gave you a lot of great feedback on that.
Mhm.
What I'd like to share with you, and Maureen, you can pipe in when you feel inspired, is during our priestess process. Remember, Maureen and I are from the same priestess lineage. We did a lot of conscious work with our inner masculine, which for many of the women in my priestess circle at the time had never had an opportunity to do that before. And so some of the tools that we used to do that with was through writing to our inner masculine and having our inner masculine respond to us through this writing process. And then, of course, we did meditations as well, where we were guided into meeting our inner masculine and being able to see our inner masculine. And as I said earlier, I actually never got a vision of my inner masculine during that time. And it wasn't until we were in France that he actually showed up and showed himself to me. And I visually saw him in this meditative space, what he looked like. So anyhow, those are some tools that you can use to start that conversation with your inner masculine and get a feel for him. And what Carrie said about the difference in the energy of the sacred masculine energy being far and gone from the patriarchal energy is very accurate, because patriarchal energy is not masculine energy. It's the sacred masculine that's been made profane.
Mhm.
And so that's the first layer of healing that has to happen. And there's an excellent book, and I'm going to pause right now so that I can find it and show it to you. Hold on a second. I'll be right. This was a book that I was introduced to in my priestess process. It's called Unplugging the Patriarchy. And the author is Lucia Renee. I've actually read this book 3 times. And because the patriarchal energy is, some would say, even tens of thousands of years old on this planet, we have to take the layers of this patriarchy identification off of our inner masculine before we can have a genuine relationship with him. And I think that that's why it probably took me so long to actually be able to see my inner masculine, is because I was still working on layer upon layer upon layer. So we're talking, it was about a 6-year time period between the time I was initially doing this work and the time I actually my inner masculine actually showed himself to me. Doesn't mean you'll have that same experience. You may see yours right away. The significant point is peeling back these layers of the false masculine to get to the genuine masculine energy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Mine showed up in a dream. And so you might find it there too. His mission and how he looked both showed up in the same dream. How we worked together.
And you can ask him, different questions that might be of interest to you. And because you do know now, which we did not know at that time, who your masculine overtone archetype is, that may even help you to formulate some of those questions. Is that all good?
Yes.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, so closure on the second Mars labor. So this was the second labor of Hercules that I pulled out and we discussed in the last class. I don't know if any of you encountered any of these elements in your second labor. I don't know if you're able to identify any kind of an experience on any level, spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical, that may have garnered your attention for you to recognize, oh, this is related to this second labor. But if you did, please take time now to share with us about that. Doreen, did you have anything?
Well, I guess about the ally.
So what about the ally?
Yeah.
How did you experience that?
And that's what I'm kind of processing still, the ally piece.
So did you confront any monsters? Were
I
you
did.
attacked by any enemies?
I
Were
was.
you, excuse me?
Carrie.
I did, and I was,
Mhm.
and I won.
Do you want to elaborate on that? I mean, this is
I will when we're in our group session, maybe, but not on a recorded session.
okay.
I've got a few, actually, 2 parallel instances, one professional, one personal.
Okay.
Nothing I'm not used to. Like I said, I've done this journey. This journey is not new to me. So it's more like, here we go again. But it was very interesting. We're talking a long battle concluded in this cycle victoriously.
Well, that's good. Were you able to create any kind of a talisman from that conclusion?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. A talisman would be, help me understand what I'm looking for. I think the answer is yes, but I'm trying to figure out how to answer.
Okay, so we can just use this second labor, the myth of this second labor of Hercules as an example. So, you know, after he's killed the Hydra, which remember, 8 of the heads are mortal and the 9th one is immortal, and you can't kill the immortal one until the 8 are killed, and they use the fire to keep them from springing out all over the place.
Right. It's a
So
weapon.
then-
It's basically a tool, a magical, mystical method or tool. So I got a few things going. I've collected a few rocks this part of the journey, and they're very specific. They're very specific. I have one specifically for my heart chakra because that has been a big part of my Venus journey.
Mhm.
And this is important because this comes with another talisman. So I'm going to bring this back up. But the other thing that I have is this opalite, which was recently given to me by a now former friend officially today. And this, however, is supposed to help open up your spiritual senses and revelations and support the dream world. And really it's what it was given because I've been getting a lot of more, I'm working on the dream work thing is part of my new accoutrement. It would be a talisman, I guess. So my dreams and I found I didn't have this for a bit and I wasn't remembering, I wasn't having conscious awareness for my dreams. I still get results from my dreams, but I wasn't aware of what was going on. And that was kind of, feel like I'm missing something that's really good that's going on right now by not being aware. And as soon as I got this, I slept with it in my hand and I had visions that I could recall. So that has helped, but I want to get back to this heart one.
Can you pause just a second? What
Yes.
is the name of the stone that you just put back?
This
down
is
at
an opalite.
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 Okay.
Okay.
And I thought, doesn't amethyst also assist with dreams?
There's a lot of different stones that do a lot of similar things. And they do them differently. So you're right, amethyst does a lot of things I said, but it's a very active energy and would not be so good for sleeping necessarily. But you're right, it does also connect to the myth. They are all supposed to in some way, shape, or form. This one was given to me for the purpose of dreaming. When I look it up, that's not its primary purpose, but it does serve that purpose, and that is what I've been using it for.
What's its primary purpose?
It confuses me because it depends on what you read.
Oh,
But basically, the cosmic connection
yeah.
to this, so it makes sense that in the dream, creativity, that kind of stuff, a lot of similar stuff is amethyst for that matter, but this is for, I would wear amethyst awake and I use this for sleep, but that's me.
Interesting.
Active energy versus a quieter, from my experience. Heart chakra, this is important because this is so important because this is on both of my journeys right now. This is really important because it gets back to this and what I was saying earlier before tape rolled about the wounded earth star chakra and how those with a wounded earth star chakra tend to be very in tune to their upper chakra. So they tend to constantly trying to commune with spirit. And so I do believe I'm one of those people that has had a damaged, actually, I believe all of them. I believe my feminine emergency that took me into this last feminine cycle that we're in with Venus and now also with Mars, but I'm more familiar with Mars. I believe that was all part of that experience. I lost track, hang on. The heart chakra. So it occurred to me, and I'm getting validation from sources that, and I figured it out in September-ish that my heart chakra was really, it wasn't, I was focused on my solar plexus chakra, but then I realized it was really my heart chakra that I think was kind of, and so I started really focusing on opening up my heart chakra while surgeries took care of the rest that was going on below.
Right.
And then I discovered, talk about talisman. So this is a big one. This is big. This is a big part of my journey. Opening up my heart chakra. It has been tested, and boy, has it been tested. It has been tested, 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 tested. But what I'm finding is that it's my talisman, because when I danced with the devil, when I confronted the monster, this time, and I've been confronting, it's been a long battle. I confronted the monster with love. I confronted everything actually that I've been doing has been from this place, this place that I'm focusing on opening and entertaining and softening, and as much as it's being tested, it is remaining there. And I have found that it's this wonderful. So instead of thinking, boy, I wish this person would X, Y, and Z, and I can think of lots of things to say, I thought a loving thought about that person. I hope this person gets this,
Right.
what's right for them, because this is not. And in that loving act, something that I had been, that was right, that needed to be done for so long, finally came to fruition. But not until first I had to be attacked because I wasn't going to do it. And then I had to confront the monster, and I confronted the monster with love. I didn't prepare anything except my heart and my connection with source. And that's how I was victorious. So that's my talisman, my heart, my heart.
Beautiful.
Because I realized I'm only 50. I realized that the thing I've been trying to hold on to all this time, the thing that I realize is damaged, it's the heart. It's this deep loving place, this place that says I can love like I have never been hurt before. And when I do, I am free to feel all the good things that come with being present in the now. But when I'm not, if it's closed, if it's defensive, and it has had every excuse and every reason to, but that's not what this journey is about. The journey, remember, we used our talons to carve our skin off of us in one of the labors, the labors before this labor. Well, when we did that, we were supposed to also shed our fears. And that's why I say we got to go into this brave and keep in mind that as much as the truth hurts, it won't kill you. But ignoring it might.
Thank you for sharing, Carrie. I know it takes a lot of courage to allow yourself to be seen fully like that.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I'm not sure. I'm still contemplating the ally piece. I think for me, I'm confronting kind of, as Carrie said, kind of letting go of those fears. And I think for me, kind of, maybe it is owning more of my masculine side, like standing more in myself and being more of an advocate for myself. I think, those are the things that I think this is bringing forth for me at this point. I'm not sure of the ally piece, but.
Well, this is interesting to consider, because so often, we're trained to look outside of ourselves. And so it's natural to look outside of ourselves for an ally as well. But it could be that the ally for your inner masculine is your inner feminine. Or it could be that an ally for your inner masculine is your inner Hercules or your inner Merlin or your inner Arthur. So I'm just offering you an opportunity to expand the realm of possibilities of how your ally can reveal themselves to you. And it may they may look like something would have never considered possible before.
Mm-hmm. No, good point. Thank you for that.
It could also be in this room. I mean, you joined this effort,
Yes.
right? So here's some allies.
Yeah.
How about you, Maureen? Anything coming up around the second labor that you'd like to?
You know, there was a saying my father taught me. It was in Pogo. He loved Pogo. It was a comic of the day. I think Pogo maybe was a possum, but anyway, it was in the comic that the character said, "I have seen the enemy, and the enemy is me." And that's exactly what came up for me. I had a reoccurrence of a rather ugly part of myself that I thought I had overcome, but I hadn't. So so that I've been working on. And I also have a talisman I got. It's a phoenix. I don't know if you guys can
Yeah.
see it or not. It's a phoenix. It's a jasper phoenix. And that is my talisman for the underworld, because it is my intention to burn to the ground everything that no longer serves. And I will be reborn as the phoenix is, a fresh and new experience of myself. That's the intention. And so that's the enemy. And also my ally is myself as well, aside from my group here. And but I still don't feel like I have an ally in my home, but that's okay. I'm all right.
I love how you're using the fire element to assist you the way that it was used in the second labor. You know, in the second labor, every time they would cut off one of the 8 mortal heads, 2 more would spring out in its place.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't until they realized that they could use the fire and put the fire to the mortal head that it would actually kill the head, so that they could kill all those heads and then finally kill the immortal head. So fire as an element is a really powerful element to work with, especially when we're in the underworld, I think.
I think so too. And I've been drawing fire cards from our natural rhythms deck to work with daily, and that's helping a lot also. But you know, it's kind of a contained journey at this point, because I'm isolated sort of from a lot of things because of COVID. So it's been a pretty much of an internal journey. And so any ally I have would come from something I experienced internally.
Sun Tzu would like credit for being an ally,
Yeah.
so you know.
Yes, he's a wonderful ally.
Yeah, that's just how I feel, and that's a pretty good thing. You know, I think it's to finally accept yourself as having been an enemy, and now you're going to be an ally to your own person, spiritually, physically, all of the ways that we do that. Yeah, so
That's kind of what I meant
Phoenix with me.
by the safety net, you know, that by there actually, you know, it being an illusion, because ultimately we do have to find the way to what we want through ourselves, not through others. And so, yes, ultimately it is a bit of a lonely journey. In that is, it is your personal, it is yours. And the responsibility for it falls squarely, you know, in our own lap. And the beauty of COVID is, if there is one, let's just say the beauty of the isolation. The beauty of the isolation is that it gives opportunity to fulfill one's need with oneself, because mother is, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And so when we're forced to be resourceful, when we're forced to seek solace in self, when we're forced to turn to ourselves for entertainment or for whatever, we build our own self-reliance, which is part of the hero journey.
Very good. All of that's fantastic. Is everybody feeling complete on the closure piece, or?
Yeah, it was exciting. I'm ready to close it.
Okay. Am I getting a thumbs up from everybody? Okay, excellent. All right, so let's talk about what the myth of the third labor is. Here's a little image here of Hercules taking down the hind. The hind of, okay, again, I'm not a Greek scholar, don't know how to pronounce the name of this town. I tried to look it up on the internet and I got different versions. So no luck there. Anyhow, this hind, this famous hind, is living in this town in Greece, which is about 50 miles from the king's palace, the king that is giving Hercules these layers at the bequest of Hera, who's trying to do him in. So it turns out that a hind is a female red deer. But what's spectacular about this particular hind is a couple of things. This hind has golden antlers and hoofs of bronze. And this particular hind is sacred to the goddess Diana because it's her special pet. And it just so happens that goddess Diana is a moon goddess. So this is really significant for two reasons. One, we know that the activation of the labor is signified by the conjunction of the planets Mars and the moon in the sky. So the moon comes into play there. And also, the day before this labor, we've got that Saturn square Uranus. And it turns out, as we'll see coming up, that the moon is active there as well. So the fact that this particular labor has to do with the moon goddess Diana is significant. Now, because this hind is sacred to Diana, Hercules can either wound it or kill it. And so what happens eventually is, after a year of hunting this thing, he gets an opportunity to get the deer, but only by shooting an arrow at it and being able to capture her that way. But, you know, he's wounded the deer. So as luck would have it, as he's on his way back to the king and he's got this wounded deer, you know, who do you not want to meet? The king because you didn't get the hind, or the goddess Diana with the deer you weren't supposed to wound? So Hercules meets up with the goddess Diana and the god Apollo on his way back. And of course, you know, initially she's very angry, but he explains to her how he had to do this, that he didn't want to do it, but he had to do it because he has to do these labors. And so Diana, as the moon goddess, is able then to let go of her anger and heals the deer's wound so that Hercules can now carry the hind back to the king, but the hind is no longer wounded. So that's the labor. How do you catch this hind that, that is really under the protection of the goddess Diana? So that's the whole third labor. Now, what we discover here is that in the sky, Mars and Moon are coming together as the third labor, again in the sign of Taurus. Remember last month, the second labor was in the sign of Taurus. This month, it's in the sign of Taurus as well. However, Mars and Moon is making 3 aspects from their conjunction. First of all, they're in sextile here to Asmodeus and Medusa. Remember, sextile is a 60-degree orb. Square Venus. What did we say before about the fact that in this myth, or where was it, up here, when we were talking about Pluto, and this myth, the Ceres Proserpina myth, that all got started because Venus took pity on Pluto and wanted Cupid to shoot him with one of his love arrows. So here she shows up now, where this third labor is square Venus, and here she is the moon goddess. And then, and remember, a square is 90 degrees, opportunities for breakthroughs in consciousness. And then we have it trining Pluto, the lord of the underworld. So we have all of these pieces coming together in the sky at this labor, which is really fascinating to me. And remember, a trine, 120-degree aspect, is a very harmonious flow of energy from the lord of the underworld. Well, remember, we found out that it turns out that the lord of the underworld is also the granter of luck and also the begetter of wealth. So here we've got this harmonious flow of energy between Mars and Moon and Pluto. And I've described the feeling of that energy of like being on a raft on a river and just letting the river carry the raft down, and you're just there very harmoniously going down the river. That's the energy flowing between Pluto, the Mars, and the Moon. So this is what's happening in the sky. Now, remember that this is happening in Taurus. So these are some traits that you may have had come up last month at the second labor that may come up again, because as Daniel Giamario says, where these events are happening in the sky influences the kind of experience that you can have at these labors. So we did go through these before, but let's just go through them again. Just as bulls are known for their incredible stubbornness, this Taurian energy often manifests as being very set in your ways. This quality makes you super resistant to change. So you may have an experience this month, you may have last month, where you are coming up against those areas where you're not wanting to change. This energy isn't fond of authority and might manifest as challenging a teacher or professor, a boss, whomever you consider an authority figure, law enforcement, your doctor, right? Who you believe is wrong about something or just wasting your time. This energetic influence can cause you to take your pleasure-seeking ways too far, and such hedonistic tendencies can lead to outright laziness and procrastination. And on the other end of this spectrum, this energy can manifest as huge perfectionists. If something or someone isn't absolutely perfect, you may turn up your nose and walk away. So these can give you some insights into the kind of labor you may experience this month, along with going back to this myth of this third labor of Hercules. being given an insurmountable task where you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You know, who is the lesser of the two evils? Meeting the king without the hind, or meeting the goddess Diana, whose sacred pet I've had to wound in order to get this to the king. So these are the kinds of themes that may show up for you this month at this labor. Any questions about any of that? Okay, so now let's take a look very quickly, because this is significant, at this first Saturn square Uranus event that's happening the day before. Remember, Saturn is in Aquarius. Here's an image of the Aquarian energies. And it was in these Aquarian energies that we had that Earth Star Chakra activation for the sacred feminine. And Uranus is in Taurus. Here's an image of the Taurus energies again. This is where the energies of the sacred masculine's third labor activation is happening. So this is the difference between the sacred feminine activation and the sacred masculine activation on an energetic level, where these two luminary bodies are, and now they're squaring off against each other. And remember, with squares, opportunities for breakthroughs in consciousness, but you have to be willing to cross the threshold to take the opportunity. If you don't cross the threshold, and it's your choice not to cross the threshold, then you miss the opportunity for that breakthrough. That's the significant thing to remember. So let's look at the aspects. Here we go. There's that moon. Diana, the goddess Diana, is conjunct Uranus in Taurus, and Sekhmet is conjunct Saturn in Aquarius. So this first square becomes a little bit more, what is the word I want to find? It's not a vanilla, it's not a vanilla square, right? It's not a vanilla ice cream square. It's more like something a little bit more interesting. Maybe not chocolate chip, maybe not even mint chocolate chip, maybe more like rocky road, because we've got these other energies that are a part of this activation of this square, with the Diana moon goddess energies being involved, and the Sekhmet energies of the goddess of equity and atonement being involved. And what's fascinating about this square is that it is happening exactly, well, not exactly, within 14 minutes, so almost exactly, right? The width of a strand of hair. It is reactivating the point of that second labor. That second labor took place at 7 degrees Taurus, 0 minutes. This square between Uranus and Saturn is exact at 7 degrees Taurus, 14 minutes. There's no mistaking the fact that this is a significant reactivation of that second labor. It's no mistaking the fact that that second labor involved these Taurian energies, and now this first square of Saturn and Uranus and this third labor is all, involving these Taurian energies. So be very aware for yourself how these negative traits of Taurus energies may be showing up through you. This is by far not an exhaustive list. There are other ways that the shadow side of Taurus can show up, but this is a huge clue to you in terms of how you may be experiencing these events, particularly because of the fact that we've got so much of this sacred feminine energy involved, and we know that Venus is in the Inanna underworld. So it may not be a warm and fuzzy experience. Now, there are numerous aspects going on in the sky at the time of this square. So what I had to do for the sake of time and simplicity is I just chose the ones that I felt were the most potent in terms of the influence for us regarding this event individually and also collectively with the third labor activation and how they weave together. So I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my throat today. Pardon me. So what we find is that there are two yods in the sky. Now, if the two of you have looked at the book that I wrote on the aspects, you will have seen this yod described in there. But in terms of the classes that you've attended so far, you may not have heard about what a yod is. And it's an aspect where you have a base, and the 2 points on the base are in sextile to each other. That's 60-degree orb. And their energies come way up to a point, an apex. So it looks like a real skinny triangle. And from the base to that point on either side, it's 150 degrees. That's called an inconjunct. And so this base is taking their energies and they're thrusting them up here to the point to create something new. And where they're pointing to in your chart and in these events is what's called, it's been called the finger of God. I call it the finger of the goddess. It's a point of destiny. It's a point of destiny that what's happening here at this apex is destined to occur. And it doesn't matter what's going on around you, come hell or high water, you cannot fail at this mission. It will take place. And so we don't have only one of these yods, but we've got two of them happening here at this Saturn square Uranus event. And we'll see that when I show you the chart. What's interesting here, again, going back to Pluto and the myth of Pluto, is not only was Diana instrumental in kicking off the events that initiated that story about the abduction of Proserpina, but here in the base of this first yod, this sextile involves Ceres, the mother of Proserpina. So we're seeing these elements come together. Here, Venus is in this second yod. So we've got Diana from the myth of the Hercules third labor involved. And we've got Ceres and Venus from the myth from Pluto of the abduction of Proserpina being involved. So all of these are synchronistically coming together here, which is why I took the time to go over that information at the beginning when I was simply inspired to do an invocation to Pluto. So what we find out here is with this second yod, at the base, we've got Yeshua on one side and Venus at the other. Where Venus is located, it is activating the point of this third labor a day before, right? This is on the 17th, the third labor is on the 18th. So it's like priming that point in the sky for the third labor to take place. And then we have a mutable grand cross. And remember, with mutable grand crosses, it's the beginning of something new or something is getting changed into something new through these two oppositions. So we'll look at that as well. So here we go. Here is that Uranus in Taurus, Uranus moon in Taurus, square Sekhmet and Saturn. There that is. Here is in the purple, that's that mutable Grand Cross. The first yod is blue, I believe. Let me just double check. Oh, that's the second yod. The first yod is yellow. The first yod, we've got Sedna in Ceres, and they're pointing over here to Magdalene and Libra. And the second yod, we've got Yeshua and Venus pointing here to Vesta. Look at how that's activating one of the points of the mutable cross. And then here we've got Venus in the sky squaring Mars right where that, right close to where that Mars moon conjunction of the third labor is going to happen the next day. So just wanted you to be able to see these here. We will look at these in much greater depth when you have your personal session with me, so that we can see where any of this is activating your solar return chart. Sorry, I'm starting to have problems finding my words, so just bear with me. Okay, so that's happening the day before. It's like setting the scene for what's happening the next day. So the next day, here we go with the third labor. These are those three aspects that this conjunction is having in the sky. There's that trine to Pluto. Here we got Venus again. We, of course, have the Uranus Saturn square, which we've already talked about. And then we've got this interesting aspect between the sacred masculine allies, Merlin and Arthur, being trined Hercules. Isn't it interesting that Merlin and Arthur are sextile Magdalene? And remember, Magdalene is the apex of that first yod. And then we've got Merlin and Arthur being sextile to Osiris and the sun. Turns out that Osiris's father is the sun god, Ra. So it's interesting that father and son are conjunct here. So let's see what they look like. So here's in the burgundy, that's where the third labor activation is taking place. Mars and moon. And you can see here's the sextile to Medusa and Asmodeus. Here's the square to Venus in red, and here's the trine to Pluto in red. Right here in the green, that's that Saturn-Uranus square that took place the day before, but these are slow-moving planets, so that square is still in effect. Here's Merlin and Arthur down here, and you can see how it's interacting with the sun and Osiris. You can see how he's interacting with Hercules and how they're interacting with the Magdalene. Remember, what I did is I took that blue, the first yod, and I laid it on here, and the yellow, the second yod, and I laid it on top of here too, so that you could see how they're interacting. This first yod, the base here, it's interacting with Hercules and the Magdalene. It's very close, not exact. Remember that that's almost at 29 degrees, I think there, and these are at 22, so about a 7-degree orb up there. So that's why I didn't include that. And then this first yod, look at what's happening. The base interacting here where Venus is. And so what I did, you see these green squares, is I actually put these squares around the places of this third labor to show you which places of this third labor aspects are being most amplified, most influenced by these aspects from the previous days, Uranus square Saturn. So these are the areas that we're going to be looking at mostly when we do your personal readings, because that's where the focal point of these energies are hitting. And then, of course, if any of these other areas are really ringing a bell on your solar return chart, we'll look at those too. But we can see here what I would call the hot spots from everything that happens with the exact Saturn Uranus square, and then the Mars third labor activation. Does that make sense to all of you? Maureen, you good?
Yes, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah. I love how all of the allies that we identified for the sacred masculine to work with are engaged at this point between the Saturn Uranus square and the actual labor activation. That's really significant. Okay. So these are the vision quest opportunities that you can engage should you so choose, right? Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to play with these vision quest opportunities. So you're going to have to use the book that I provided with you that has the astrological keywords. Now remember, those keywords are just a jumping off place. You can take those keywords and go out to Google, the thesaurus, and find other words from the thesaurus that may resonate more finely with you, okay? But let's look at those areas highlighted by the two yods. This is significant. These are the areas in green, those squares. Those are the areas that those yods, which we know are highly significant because we're dealing with points of destiny here. And, you know, try to figure out for yourself how any of those energies are being experienced by you as a part of this, you know, third labor. And then you can do the same for these Taurus energies, and the shadow side of these Taurus energies, trying to figure out which expressions of that Taurus energy are being experienced by you as a part of your personal third labor. Any questions about those vision quest opportunities? All right, so we're going to have our group session next Saturday at 2. I know that's kind of a small window of time to kind of feel into those energies. And, you know, those vision quest opportunities you can work with throughout the entire month. You don't have to do it just this week for the Saturday group session. All right. All right. And then for next month, our Sacred Feminine class, when we're going to be in the Underworld, will be on March 8th. And our fourth labor will be on March 13th. So we've talked a lot about this today. A lot of really good discussion has come up around all of this. Is there anything else that anyone is desiring to speak to that's come up as we've moved forward? Are there any questions that require clarity? Okie dokie then. I'm being met with a wall of silence, so I take that as a no. All right then. All I can say, kind of as a spinoff of what Maureen said earlier, is, be kind to yourself. You do not have to be your own enemy, right? Be kind and gentle with yourself. Do whatever it takes to nurture you. Whatever that may be, a nap, a ride on the horse, a hot shower, snow angels, whatever it is. Make that your mantra. Be kind and gentle to yourself. Okay? Because we are really we're getting down and dirty now.
Thank you, Sophia, Mona Lisa.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
All right. As always, if you need to reach out, send me a text or an email. You're welcome to do so. And then,
We have the group next Saturday at 2, and then our next class is Monday, March 8th at 2.
right. So after Saturday's group, you can start scheduling your personal sessions.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. And we'll have a lot to go over between both the sacred feminine activation and the sacred masculine activation.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, you gorgeous goddesses.
Right back
Well,
at you.
positive energy your way, Sophia, Mona Lisa.
Yeah, right back at you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, and just enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys next Saturday.
Okay,
You as well. Thank you.
Okay,
bye.
Mwah.
bye.